The jungle was silent, except for the rain. Sheets of water slid down black rock, past twisted roots, into a valley of ghosts. Once, this ridge had been alive with gunfire, tracer rounds, mortars, screams. Now it was only the whisper of wind over broken helmets. They called it Unclimbable, a spine of volcanic earth running south of a small airfield on an island called Guadalcanal, 120 feet high, covered in dense kunai grass and knife-edged ridges. It was no place any sane man would choose to fight. But in September of 1942, men didn't have a choice. The Empire of Japan had been unstoppable for nearly a year, from Pearl Harbor to Singapore, from the Philippines to the jungles of New Guinea. Everywhere they went, the rising sun rose higher. Until here, a few thousand U.S. Marines dug in around a half-finished airstrip called Henderson Field, a patch of coral and clay that would soon decide the fate of the Pacific. And guarding its southern edge was a hill so steep, so unforgiving, that even the Japanese officers believed no one could attack across it. They were wrong, because in the nights that followed, the jungle would explode with fire, courage, and madness. And the name Edson's Ridge would be carved into Marine Corps legend forever. August 1942, the United States had just begun to fight back. After months of retreat and humiliation across the Pacific, the Marines landed on Guadalcanal, a remote, snake-infested island in the Solomon Chain, 3,500 miles from Pearl Harbor. It was America's first major offensive of the war, and nobody knew if it would work. The mission was simple on paper: capture the Japanese-built airfield and hold it. But the moment the Marines hit the beach, the plan began to unravel. The jungle swallowed men whole. The humidity hit like a wall. Weapons jammed from the mud, and the mosquitoes, clouds so thick they looked like smoke, carried malaria that could drop a man faster than a bullet. Corporal Frank Dillon of the 1st Marine Division wrote home, "We sleep in water, eat in mud, and fight in hell. But it's our hell now." By the second week, they renamed the airstrip after a fallen pilot, Major Lofton Henderson, and began flying missions against Japanese ships. Tokyo was furious. They'd built that airfield to control the South Pacific, to threaten the sea lanes between the US and Australia. Now, a few thousand barbarians, as the Japanese called them, had stolen it, and the emperor wanted it back. Tall, lean, with sharp blue eyes and a voice that could cut through artillery fire, Edson was the kind of officer every Marine wanted to follow. He'd fought in Nicaragua, led raids in Tulagi, and earned his nickname from the shock of red hair under his battered campaign hat. His men, the 1st Marine Raider Battalion, were elite, handpicked for speed, aggression, and endurance. They were built for hit-and-run operations, not long defensive sieges. But on Guadalcanal, everyone became a defender. When Edson first saw the ridge south of Henderson Field, he didn't like it. A narrow plateau running about 2,000 yards, with steep slopes dropping into ravines on both sides. From its crest, you could see the entire airfield. If the enemy ever got up there, they could pour fire straight down onto the runways. Edson pointed to it on the map and told his executive officer, "If I were the Japanese, I'd come from here." The staff laughed. The ridge was too steep, too tangled with jungle. No one would ever try to climb it. Edson didn't laugh. He ordered his raiders to dig in along the ridge anyway, shallow foxholes hacked out of red clay, firing lines covered with logs and palm fronds. It was a miserable position. Daytime heat reached 100 degrees. Nighttime rain turned everything to sludge. Rations came by mule, or not at all. But from that ridge, they could see the tree line where the jungle ended, and they knew the enemy was out there, watching. On the other side of the island, Major General Kiyotake Kawaguchi studied his own maps by candlelight. He was a veteran of China, confident and ruthless, a man who believed in the divine spirit of the Japanese soldier. His 35th Infantry Brigade had just landed on Guadalcanal, and his orders were simple: destroy the Marines, recapture the airfield. He knew the Americans were exhausted. He knew they were short on food, ammunition, and medical supplies. And he believed that one bold strike could wipe them from the island. The terrain was terrible: dense jungle, flooded rivers, ridges of volcanic stone, but Kawaguchi saw opportunity where others saw obstacles. "The enemy will never expect an attack from the south," he told his officers. "We will strike where no white man can climb." His plan was daring, even brilliant. 3 regiments would converge on the marine perimeter from different directions. While one attacked from the west and another from the east, his main force, nearly 3,000 men, would slip through the jungle and strike from the south, up the steep ridge that guarded the airfield. If they could break through there, they would drive straight into Henderson Field and wipe out the American foothold before dawn. It was a plan built on 2 assumptions: that the jungle would hide them, and that the Marines would never see them coming. Both would prove disastrously wrong. For days, the jungle was alive with invisible motion. Marine scouts reported flickers of light deep in the trees, maybe reflections, maybe eyes. At night, they could hear distant drums, the rhythm of men moving through mud. Edson's raiders were stretched thin. Only about 800 men covered the ridge, barely enough to fill a football stadium. Most had been fighting and patrolling for weeks without rest. Their uniforms were torn, their boots rotting, their skin covered in jungle rot and insect bites. They slept in holes filled with water, their rifles wrapped in oil-soaked rags to keep the rust off. One Marine later said, "The jungle didn't scare us. It just waited to eat us when we fell." On September 11th, the first real signs came. Japanese aircraft bombed the airfield all afternoon. That night, naval gunfire pounded the marine perimeter. The island shook. Edson knew what that meant. An attack was coming. He just didn't know from where. The next day, he walked the ridge again, up and down the muddy slope, stopping at each foxhole. He spoke quietly to the men, steady and calm. "You might think they won't come up this way," he said, "but they will. And when they do, I want you ready." That night, as the sun sank into the ocean, the rain began to fall again. Torrents of water drenched the ridge, turning the clay to slime. Lightning flashed on the horizon, silhouetting the airfield below. Somewhere in the jungle beyond, 3,000 Japanese soldiers were on the move. They were tired, hungry, and soaked to the bone, but their officers shouted above the storm, "Forward, for the Emperor!" They carried rifles, bayonets, and packs of ammunition. They climbed by pulling on vines, crawling over roots slick with moss. Men slipped, fell, and vanished into the darkness below. But still, they came on one after another, driven by pride, by discipline, by madness. By midnight on September 12th, the first scouts of the Kawaguchi Brigade reached the base of the ridge. They looked up through the sheets of rain. Above them, the slope rose like the side of a mountain, and somewhere at the top, American Marines waited in the dark. They tightened their helmets, fixed their bayonets, and began to climb. The first rain-soaked hours of September 13th, 1942. Somewhere in the black jungle south of Henderson Field, the Japanese army was climbing. The Marines couldn't see them, but they could feel them, a pressure in the air, like the island itself was holding its breath. Every sound echoed. Every drop of rain seemed louder than it should have been. On the ridge, Colonel Merritt Red Mike Edson crouched in his command post, a shallow hole dug under a tangle of vines, rainwater dripping from the brim of his hat. He listened to the jungle. A runner stumbled in, panting. "Sir, outposts report movement south slope. Could be a patrol. Could be more." Edson looked at his map. He already knew what was coming. "They're not patrolling," he said quietly. "They're coming for us." At 9 p.m., it began. A sharp burst of rifle fire cracked through the trees, followed by the rattle of a machine gun. Then another, closer. Green tracers cut through the rain, and from the jungle below came the deep, rhythmic cry of men shouting in unison. "Banzai! Banzai!" The ridge erupted. Marines sprang from their foxholes, slapping mud from their rifle bolts. The front lines vanished in smoke and flashes of light. Everywhere, the sound of shouting Japanese voices in the darkness, climbing, charging, dying. The first wave hit the raiders' southern flank hard. Grenades burst among the foxholes. One machine gun team was wiped out almost instantly. For a moment, the line wavered, but Edson's men held. Private Joe Hoole, manning a Browning automatic rifle, fired until his weapon glowed red. They kept coming. Every time one dropped, two more crawled up behind him. We were shooting into shadows. For 2 hours, the battle raged up and down the slope. The Japanese climbed over their own dead, bayonets flashing in lightning. The Marines fired until their belts ran dry, then fought with knives, shovels, and fists. By midnight, the air was thick with gunpowder and rain. The ridge was a chaos of screams and explosions, men fighting so close they could smell each other's breath. Down below, General Kawaguchi stood in the mud, his uniform plastered with rain. His face was lit by the glow of burning flares. The first assault had failed, but he refused to stop. Forward. Keep pressing. The Emperor watches us. He ordered fresh companies to attack men who'd been slogging through the jungle for 36 hours without food. They fixed bayonets and climbed again, clawing their way up the ridge under machine gun fire. But the slope was too steep. Every few feet, they slipped back, crashing into their comrades. Machine gun bullets shredded the vines above their heads. Those who made it to the crest faced a wall of flame. Marines hurled grenades down the slope like rain. Tracer rounds stitched through the darkness, turning the jungle into a flickering inferno. At 1 a.m., a Japanese bugle sounded the signal for a final charge. Hundreds of soldiers surged forward in one desperate wave. They broke through the Marine left flank and reached the plateau near Edson's command post. For the first time, the line cracked. Edson was in the thick of it. His carbine jammed with mud, so he grabbed a Tommy gun from a fallen Marine and climbed to the crest. Through smoke and rain, he saw his raiders pulling back, bloodied and exhausted. They were outnumbered 3-1. He raised his voice above the chaos. "Hold what you've got. No one goes back. We hold here, or we die here." It wasn't a speech. It was an order. And somehow, it worked. The raiders rallied around their colonel. They fell back 100 yards to a secondary position, a narrow saddle in the ridge, barely 100 yards wide. Edson placed his command post there, right in the middle of the line. If the Japanese broke through again, they'd have to go through him. The Marines dug in, shoulder to shoulder. Machine guns set up on either side of the saddle. Riflemen lay in the mud, fixing bayonets, whispering prayers. Behind them, the airfield glowed faintly in the distance, the reason they couldn't fail. "That's Henderson Field," Edson told his men. "If they take it, every man on this island dies. So we stop them here." Around 2 a.m., the next attack came. It started with flares, white balls of light drifting down from the clouds, casting ghostly shadows across the ridge. Then came the screams. "Banzai! Banzai!" Hundreds of Japanese soldiers charged again, this time straight into the saddle. They came through sheets of rain, firing from the hip, bayonets fixed. The Marines opened up with everything they had: Browning, 30 caliber machine guns, BARs, and Tommy guns. The ridge flashed like a thunderstorm. Still they came. Sergeant Al Schmid, half blind from mud and sweat, fired his machine gun until the barrel glowed white. Corporal James Lyman stood beside him feeding the belt, shouting, "Keep it hot, keep it hot." Bodies piled up on the slope, but the attackers didn't stop. Some made it through hand-to-hand combat in the trenches, knives, fists, and bayonets in the dark. A Marine corporal later recalled, "It was so close you could feel the heat off their rifles. You didn't aim anymore, you just fired at anything that moved." By 3:30 a.m., the line was buckling. Japanese soldiers had infiltrated between the foxholes, cutting phone wires and throwing grenades into command pits. Edson called in flares. The night turned white. He grabbed a radio operator and shouted into the handset, "Artillery! Target my position! Fire for effect!" Seconds later, 105mm shells from the Marine artillery batteries down by the airfield began to explode across the ridge. The ground shook. The air filled with dust, rain, and fragments of trees. The Japanese attack stalled, then broke. Men screamed as shrapnel tore through the jungle. Edson stood in the open, covered in mud, pointing and yelling orders as if the world wasn't collapsing around him. "Shift left, keep your fire tight." He moved from foxhole to foxhole, steadying the line, handing out ammunition, patting men on the shoulder. Everywhere he went, the raiders found their courage again. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The jungle steamed in the early light. The ridge was carpeted with bodies, Japanese and American, tangled together in the mud. The air stank of gunpowder and blood. When the sun finally broke through, the survivors saw what they'd done. Hundreds of enemy soldiers lay dead within a few yards of the Marine line. Some had died with their hands still clutching rifles, their faces twisted in silent fury. The Japanese had fought with incredible bravery, but the ridge had held. Edson climbed to the crest and looked down toward Henderson Field, still there, still flying the American flag. He turned to his men, his voice raw from shouting all night. "You did it, boys. You stopped them." He didn't smile. He just sat down in the mud, exhausted. The raiders had lost 60 men killed and over 200 wounded, nearly a third of their strength. The Japanese had lost over 800 inches a single night, and General Kawaguchi, once so confident of victory, now stumbled through the jungle in retreat. His sword lost, his army shattered. He wept as he told his staff. The spirit was strong, but the body was weak. The Marines had held Edson's Ridge, and with it, Henderson Field. But everyone knew it wasn't over. Guadalcanal still had months of hell to come. And yet, something had changed that night. For the first time in the Pacific War, the myth of Japanese invincibility had cracked, and the U.S. Marines had proven that no ridge was truly unclimbable so long as they were the ones defending it. The morning after the battle, the ridge was silent again. No gunfire, no shouting, no cries. Just the low hum of flies and the drip of rainwater from the trees. Smoke curled from burnt palm fronds and twisted roots. Empty shell casings littered the mud like brass leaves. In the thin, gray light of dawn, the survivors began to move. Marines crept from their foxholes, rifles ready, unsure if the night was truly over. Some still half expected another "Banzai" scream from the tree line. But none came. They'd fought through hell, and somehow, they were still standing. By sunrise, the full scale of what had happened became clear. The ridge was covered with bodies. Japanese soldiers lay in tangled heaps, many just yards from the Marine lines. Some still gripped their rifles. Others clutched grenades that never went off. The Marines moved carefully among them, wary of booby traps. They counted more than 800 enemy dead in front of Edson's sector alone. Private First Class Jack Niles wrote in his diary that morning, "I never knew courage could look so quiet. They came right into our guns and never stopped coming. I don't hate them anymore, not after what I saw last night." The raiders had paid a terrible price, too. Out of fewer than 840 men who began the defense, 135 were dead or missing, and another 300 wounded. Men bandaged each other with strips of torn shirts. Courtmen worked in silence, kneeling beside the fallen, whispering names into notebooks. And all across the ridge, the air smelled of mud, cordite, and death. Colonel Merritt Red Mike Edson walked the line that morning, his face streaked with grime and dried blood. He looked more like one of his enlisted men than a commanding officer. As he passed, the Marines straightened up, or tried to. Some were too weak to stand. Edson said little. He stopped by each foxhole, patted a shoulder, nodded once. At one point, he paused beside a wounded private whose hand had been torn away by a grenade. The young man looked up and whispered, "Did we hold, sir?" Edson knelt beside him. "We held," he said softly. "We held just fine." He didn't tell the boy that the ridge would soon bear his name. That would come later. When the reports reached division headquarters, General Vandegrift, commander of the 1st Marine Division, read them in silence. Then he looked up at his staff and said, "That ridge doesn't belong to the Japanese. It doesn't even belong to Guadalcanal. It belongs to Edson and his raiders." From that day forward, it was no longer Hill 123, or the Southern Ridge. It became Edson's Ridge, a name carved into Marine Corps legend. Deep in the jungle, General Kawaguchi was a broken man. His once proud brigade was in shambles. Of his 3,000 soldiers, barely 1,200 made it back to Japanese lines. He'd lost his sword in the chaos of the retreat, a symbol of personal shame. For days, he wandered barefoot through the jungle, living on roots and rainwater, until a patrol found him delirious with fever. He refused to face his men. He refused to eat. When he finally reached his headquarters on the coast, he bowed before his superiors and said simply, "I have failed the emperor." The Japanese command replaced him soon after, but the damage was already done. For the first time in the war, the imperial army had been stopped cold in a ground assault. The myth of invincibility, the belief that spiritual strength could overcome any obstacle, had met its match on a muddy ridge in the Solomons. For the next several months, Henderson Field remained the heart of the battle for Guadalcanal. Every day, Japanese ships shelled it. Every night, bombers raided it. And yet, every morning, the Cactus Air Force, as the Marines called their tiny squadron of fighters and dive bombers, took off again. They patched runways with palm logs, fueled planes with hand pumps, and fought with whatever they had left. Each plane that roared into the sky carried the memory of the men who died to keep that airfield standing. If Guadalcanal was the turning point of the Pacific War, Henderson Field was its heart, and Edson's Ridge was its shield. Weeks later, when the mail finally came through, the survivors wrote home. Some wrote simple lines, "Still alive, doing fine. Miss you." Others tried to describe what had happened, but found no words could do it justice. One Marine, Sergeant Bill Roth, began his letter like this: "We were supposed to hold for one night. We held forever." Another wrote to his wife, "Tell our boy his daddy didn't run. Tell him the ridge was steep, but we climbed it anyway." Many of those letters never made it home. The jungle claimed them, like it claimed so many things. But the spirit behind them, the determination, the defiance would travel far beyond that island. When news of the defense reached Washington, it electrified the nation. For months, the American public had heard only of defeat Bataan, Corregidor, Wake Island. Now, finally, there was hope. The press ran headlines. Marines turned back fanatic assault. Guadalcanal holds. In the Pacific, Japanese officers were stunned. One of Kawaguchi's surviving majors wrote in his diary, "They fought like demons. Even when surrounded, they refused to die quietly." The Imperial Army's confidence began to falter. Commanders realized that the Americans were no longer running. They were learning, adapting, fighting back. And at the center of that awakening stood the Marines of Edson's Ridge. In later years, veterans of the 1st Marine Raider Battalion would gather in silence whenever someone mentioned Guadalcanal. They didn't brag. They didn't need to. Those who were there remembered every face, every shout, every flash of lightning that turned night into hell. They remembered Edson, walking the line with bullets cracking overhead. They remembered the boy who asked, "Did we hold, sir?" In 1943, Merritt Red Mike Edson received the Medal of Honor for his leadership on the ridge. His citation read in part, "For extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry, in the face of almost certain annihilation." But if you'd asked him about it, he'd just shake his head and say, "It wasn't me. It was the boys." Today, if you stand on Edson's Ridge, the real one, south of modern Henderson Field, the jungle has grown back. The foxholes are filled with leaves. The air is quiet except for the hum of insects and the rustle of palm trees. But sometimes, when the rain comes down hard and the wind moves through the trees, locals say you can still hear faint echoes, the crack of rifles, the cry of men, the roar of courage that once shook this ridge. A small monument stands there now, simple and gray. Its plaque reads, "In memory of those who fought and fell here, September 12-14, 1942. And beneath it, a single line engraved in stone, "They held." Guadalcanal was the beginning of the end for the Japanese Empire. From that island onward, America went on the offensive through Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, step by bloody step, across the Pacific. But the spirit that carried them through all those battles was born here, on this ridge. The Marines learned that night what it truly meant to fight for survival, not for glory, not for medals, but for each other. In the words of an old raider years later, You don't climb a ridge like that for a flag. You climb it because the man next to you can't make it alone. And so they climbed through mud, through fire, through the impossible. Because unclimbable was never in their vocabulary. When the smoke cleared from Edson's Ridge, the battle for Guadalcanal was far from over. In truth, it had only just begun. The Japanese army wasn't ready to give up their foothold in the South Pacific. They still had thousands of men across the island, and their navy, the most powerful in the world at that time, prowled the waters beyond. But something had changed. The Marines had held, and that one fact, simple as it was, sent shockwaves far beyond the steaming jungles of Guadalcanal. For the next 5 months, Guadalcanal became the most contested piece of real estate on Earth. Each night, Japanese destroyers nicknamed the Tokyo Express slipped down the slot, the narrow channel between the Solomon Islands, unloading men and supplies under cover of darkness. Each day, American planes from Henderson Field rose to meet them, diving through clouds to strike at ships and troop barges. The island turned into a grinding, relentless war of attrition. Marines and soldiers fought not only the enemy, but starvation, malaria, and exhaustion. The jungle became both enemy and refuge, a place where men disappeared into shadow and memory. Yet through it all, Henderson Field remained in American hands. And the heart of that defense, both physically and symbolically, was the ridge where Red Mike Edson and his raiders had stood their ground. Before Guadalcanal, Japan was still on the offensive. After Guadalcanal, that momentum was gone forever. Historians would later call it the turning point of the Pacific War. But to the men who fought there, it didn't feel like a turning point. It just felt like survival. Still, the effects rippled outward like waves across an ocean. The Japanese high command had believed the Americans were weak, too soft for jungle warfare. That myth died on Guadalcanal. Every Japanese officer who survived Edson's Ridge knew that the Americans had changed. They'd learned to fight in the dark. They'd learned to fight in the mud. And, most importantly, they'd learned that they could win. But victory on Guadalcanal came at a brutal cost. More than 7,000 Americans were killed, and nearly 8,000 wounded in 6 months of combat. The Japanese losses were staggering, over 31,000 dead. The once proud Imperial Navy lost so many ships in the surrounding waters that sailors began calling it Iron Bottom Sound, a graveyard of cruisers, destroyers, and transports lying beneath the waves. For every mile gained, for every hill taken, men paid with blood. And yet, from those losses came experience, hard, bitter experience that would shape the rest of the war. The lessons learned in those jungles would guide every island landing that followed from Tarawa to Okinawa. Edson's defense of the ridge became required reading for Marine officers. Tactics, discipline, morale. His battle was studied line by line. He hadn't just saved an airfield. He'd written the manual for how to fight and survive in the Pacific. When the raiders were finally rotated off Guadalcanal in late 1942, they were ghosts of the men who'd arrived. They were leaner, harder, quieter. They didn't talk much about the ridge. When they did, it was never about glory. It was about the friends they left behind. One veteran recalled, "Every man who was up there left something on that ridge, a piece of himself he never got back." Many of them went on to fight again at Bougainville, New Georgia, and beyond. Some didn't make it home. But wherever they went, they carried with them the same spirit that had held on Guadalcanal. The belief that no matter how bad it got, they'd hold their ground. In the United States, Guadalcanal was front-page news. For a nation still reeling from Pearl Harbor and months of defeats, it was the first clear sign that the tide had turned. Newspapers printed maps of the island. Radio announcers read dispatches from the brave boys of the 1st Marine Division. Families gathered around kitchen tables, tracing with their fingers the name Guadalcanal, a place they couldn't pronounce but would never forget. President Franklin D. Roosevelt called the victory a blow that will echo around the world. It wasn't just a military success, it was psychological. For the first time, Americans believed that victory was possible. In Tokyo, the mood was far darker. After months of silence, the Imperial General Staff finally admitted the truth. Guadalcanal had been lost. The emperor's advisors gathered in hushed meetings, reviewing casualty reports that seemed impossible, entire regiments wiped out, ships sunk faster than they could be replaced. For the first time, Japan faced a question it had never dared to ask. Could they actually lose this war? General Kawaguchi, disgraced and haunted, was reassigned to staff duty. He would later write, "We underestimated not their weapons, but their hearts." That admission said more than any strategy map ever could. In the years that followed, the story of Edson's Ridge became Marine Corps legend. Recruits at Paris Island and Camp Pendleton learned the name during training. Veterans told it in quiet tones over beers, the way old soldiers do with pride and a little pain. Historians compared the battle to Thermopylae, a handful of men holding a narrow pass against overwhelming odds. But the Marines never thought of themselves as Spartans. They were just doing their job. Still, the parallels were hard to ignore. Like Leonidas at Thermopylae, Edson's men had faced an enemy who believed sheer will could overcome any defense. And like Leonidas, they'd proven that courage, discipline, and sheer stubbornness could stop an empire cold. The Battle of Edson's Ridge did more than save an airfield. It helped forge a new identity for the United States Marine Corps. Before Guadalcanal, many in Washington still saw the Marines as naval guards or small expeditionary troops. After Guadalcanal, that view vanished forever. The Marines had stood alone in the jungle, cut off, outnumbered, and still held the line. That image, the mud-caked, exhausted Marine staring into the rain, became a symbol of American endurance. In 1943, Commandant Thomas Holcomb said, "Before Guadalcanal, the enemy advanced at will. After Guadalcanal, he stopped." And that's the story. Decades later, as the veterans aged and the jungle reclaimed the battlefield, Edson's Ridge remained sacred ground. When the 1st Marine Raider Battalion held its final reunion in the 1,980 only a handful of old men were left. They stood before the monument, some leaning on canes, others on each other. The youngest among them laid a wreath at the base, where the names of the fallen were carved in bronze. No speeches were given. None were needed. Then one of them, a man who'd been just 19 on that night in 42, looked out over the ridge and whispered, "We were kids, and somehow we did the impossible." He smiled faintly. "Guess we just didn't know it couldn't be done." The lessons of Edson's Ridge didn't end in 1942. Military academies still study it today as a textbook example of small unit leadership, terrain defense, and morale under fire. It's taught not just as history, but as philosophy proof that determination can outlast chaos. In the U.S., Marine Corps' leadership principles. One phrase echoes Edson's style of command. Lead from the front. He had lived it, and his men had followed. If you walk that ridge today, you'll find the jungle quiet again, but the ghosts are still there. Not haunting, not angry, just watching. Every rustle of the leaves, every drop of rain against the stone, feels like a whisper from those who fought there. Their story doesn't belong only to the past, it belongs to every Marine who's ever faced the impossible and refused to back down. The inscription at the memorial says it all. In the face of overwhelming odds, they stood. For their brothers, for their country, for each other. And beneath it, two words that have carried the Corps through every war since. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. The war rolled on. After Guadalcanal, the Marines kept moving west island after island. Battle after battle. New names would fill the maps and the headlines. Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, each one more brutal than the last. But through every landing, every assault, every desperate holdout, there was something familiar, something born on a jungle ridge on Guadalcanal. That same grit, that same defiance, that same quiet promise between brothers. We hold. In February 1945, more than 2 years after Edson's stand, the Marines hit the beaches of Iwo Jima. It was a different kind of battle, larger, deadlier, mechanized, but the heart of it was the same. As machine gun fire cut through the volcanic ash, one platoon leader shouted, "Remember the ridge!" Most of his men didn't even know what he meant. They were too young, but they understood what it symbolized: courage when courage shouldn't be possible. And when the flag went up on Mount Suribachi, that was Guadalcanal's spirit, raised again for the world to see. Brigadier General Merritt Red Mike Edson never forgot his men. He went on to serve in other Pacific campaigns, including Bougainville and Okinawa, always with the same fearless presence that had made him a legend. After the war, he became one of the architects of modern Marine Corps doctrine, shaping how generations of officers would lead. But though the medals lined his chest, the Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, Silver Star, those who knew him said he rarely spoke of his own heroism. He spoke of his men. In an interview years later, when asked how he felt about his medal, he paused for a long time before answering quietly, "It belongs to all of them. The ones who didn't come home." After the war, Guadalcanal slipped out of the headlines. The jungle reclaimed the airfield, the foxholes, the trenches. By the 1960s, the ridge was nearly swallowed by vines. Only veterans and a few local villagers remembered what had happened there. Then, on the 40th anniversary, a small American delegation arrived. Former Marines, historians, and one frail old man with bright eyes behind thick glasses. It was Red Mike Edson. He was in his 70s then, his once fiery red hair now white. But when he stepped onto the ridge, something in him came alive again. He stood silently for a while, looking out across the tree line, seeing things no one else could: the flashes of gunfire, the cries in the night, the faces of his raiders. A journalist asked what he remembered most. Edson smiled faintly and said, "The quiet after it was over. The sound of the rain. And the thought we'd done it. Somehow, we'd done it." He didn't stay long. Before leaving, he placed a small metal cross into the earth. No ceremony, no fanfare, just a quiet salute. And then he turned and walked away. For every man whose name made the papers, there were hundreds who didn't. Men like Private First Class John Rivers, who manned a machine gun until his barrel glowed red. Corporal Joseph Sanchez, who carried wounded comrades down the slope under fire. Sergeant William McCarthy, who called artillery on his own position when the line began to break. Their names rarely appear in history books, but every Marine who's ever walked the halls of Quantico or Camp Lejeune has heard their story in one form or another. Because the legacy of Edson's Ridge isn't just about tactics or victory, it's about the character of the men who fought there. It's about the belief that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing your duty despite it. War changes technology, strategy, even geography. But some things never change the bond between those who fight side by side. That bond, that unspoken brotherhood, carried from Guadalcanal into Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Ask any Marine about the Ridge, and even if they can't place it on a map, they know what it means. It's a story passed down through generations, not as history, but as heritage. In every Marine barracks in the world, there's a quiet respect for the ones who came before. The men who held a jungle ridge with nothing but rifles, grit, and faith in each other. Guadalcanal didn't just test the Marines, it tested America. The United States had entered the war unprepared, uncertain, and afraid. By the end of Guadalcanal, it had found its footing. Factories in Detroit and Pittsburgh were running 24 hours a day. Liberty ships were crossing the Pacific faster than the enemy could sink them. Young men were lining up at recruiting stations, inspired by the stories coming out of that faraway island. For the first time, Japan wasn't advancing. For the first time, America believed it could win. And that belief began with a handful of Marines who refused to break. In the National Archives in Washington, there's an old recording, a crackling reel-to-reel interview from 1943. It's the voice of a young Marine who survived Edson's Ridge. He says, "We were scared, every one of us. But when the order came to hold the line, nobody ran. Nobody even thought about it. We just did it." Then there's a pause. You can hear him take a breath, his voice breaking slightly as he adds, "We weren't heroes. We were just Marines, and Marines don't run." That voice, trembling but proud, captures the essence of Guadalcanal better than any book or documentary ever could. Today, the site of Henderson Field is part of Honiara, the capital of the Solomon Islands. A bustling airport now stands where the jungle once burned. Planes take off daily commercial jets. Not warbirds, and few passengers realize they're flying over sacred ground. A few miles away, Edson's Ridge still rises above the trees, quiet and green again. A monument stands there now, simple, unadorned, carved with names and a phrase. They held the ridge. Every year, Marine detachments from visiting ships make the climb to pay respects. They lay a wreath, read a prayer, and salute. Sometimes they bring young Marines, barely 20 years old, to teach them where it all began. The climb isn't easy. The jungle is thick, the air heavy. By the time they reach the top, their uniforms are soaked with sweat. But when they stand there, looking out over the same slope where Edson's raiders once stood, they understand something words can't explain. It's not just history, it's inheritance. When you strip away the myths, the medals, and the monuments, what remains of Edson's Ridge is simple, a lesson that courage isn't born in a moment of glory. It's forged in fear, in exhaustion, in the refusal to quit. That leadership isn't about orders shouted from the rear, but footsteps taken at the front. And that faith in each other, in a cause, in the belief that the impossible can be done, can move mountains or climb ridges. Those men didn't set out to make history. They set out to survive. But in doing so, they became something greater. A reminder of what ordinary people can do when tested beyond the limits of endurance. As night falls over the ridge, the jungle comes alive again, the hum of insects, the distant sound of waves against the shore. If you stand there long enough, you might swear you hear something else. Two faint voices in the wind, the echo of boots in the mud, the faint crackle of gunfire that isn't there. It's not haunting, it's memory. For those who stood there, time never truly moved on. They are frozen in that night, weary, bleeding, defiant, forever holding the ridge. Back in the United States, at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, there's a mural, a painting of the Battle of Edson's Ridge. In it, you can see Red Mike standing tall amid the smoke, a pistol in one hand, shouting to his men. Behind him, silhouettes of Marines blur into the jungle, their faces lit by gunfire. At the bottom of the painting, a plaque bears his words. You can run all day, but when you can't run anymore, you fight. Visitors pass by every day, students, families, veterans. Some stop to read, others just look. But for those who understand, the meaning is clear. It's not just about that ridge, it's about every ridge since. Every hill, every trench, every moment when the odds say no, and someone says, try anyway. That's what the Marines learned on Guadalcanal. That's what America learned on Guadalcanal. And that's why, more than 80 years later, the name still carries weight. Edson's Ridge, a place where the impossible was made possible, where courage climbed higher than fear, and where, in the darkest night of the war, a handful of men lit the way for a nation.